All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004. That's Mobile APIs and Frameworks in the summer 2024 semester at Georgian, and it's week 2, part 3 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, we're going to continue with Express and what that is. We talked about Node a little bit, and we talked about how we can do stuff with the file system module in Node and really low-level commands that we used. And what I want to do now, I think we're around here. Nope. Here. There we are. We want to talk about Express. So Express is interesting. It was built on top of Connect. All right. That's what it was built on. And TJ Hollowaychuk he's a product developer. And what he did, he created the Express framework. And it was something that extended the what we could do with Node.js. Right? So Express is built on top of Connect. Right? Connect, remember, was our first module that we started to use. And Connect is middleware. Okay, now, you guys have probably heard middleware. And you might say to yourself, what the heck is middleware? What is that thing? Right? And so middleware, and we're going to talk about that in a second, it allows us to extend. I'm just going to go down to the middleware explanation. So here's middleware. Now let's talk about middleware a second. I'm just skipping those things because we're going to do Express in a second together. So I want to talk about middleware. So think about middleware as a function that goes in between the request, right? So I start off with the request. Here's the request. And it's sent to some kind of middleware. Middleware happens before the route handler, and the route handler comes back with other functions that it might do, and then response. That's what it comes down to. So middleware is in this little middle state right here, where we can put it both inside between the request and the routing, and between the response and the routing. We can use it in both places. Okay? So it's kind of like the middle layer. That's what it is, right? And so Express is like that. Express does, is itself it is middleware, but also is made up of middleware functions. That's what it is. Yeah. Sorry? The previous? This one? Yeah, like I said. So the request is made, it goes to another layer, and then when the request, so I make a request, I go on the URL, and I make a request for the server, and the request goes to the server. The request can go directly to the route, or it can go through a bunch of functions, and then it does some routing, right? So when it goes through a bunch of functions, those functions are called middleware functions. That's what they are. And it's kind of the way of intercepting. That's what we're doing. We're intercepting the request and doing something with the request before it goes to the, to the server, to the routing, right? And the same thing on the way back. When it comes back out, we can intercept the response, and we can do something with it, process it, and it can kind of go out that way too. That's what this is. So Express is made up of middleware functions, and we can use something called function chaining, which allows us to go from one function to the other function to the third function to the fourth function in a big chain of functions, right? And here's an example of Express, all right? Here's an example of it. And when we set up global middleware, right, meaning it will call every incoming request, right? That's what this does. Here is how we do that. We use app.use when we use Express, and use, basically we just create a little function here, and every single time the Express server itself receives a request, it also outputs that request to the log. That's what it does. Okay, very, very simple. So app.use, whenever you say app.use, I use a function. That's middleware. It kind of goes in between my request and my response. Okay? And there's two of them here. There's one that is, here's a function that does the request, and here's a function that responds, okay, as an example. So let's continue. This is what it kind of looks like. Here's my incoming request, and then I have my middleware. I do a res send, right, as an example, to my response, and then I do the next function. The next, whenever I see next goes to the next middleware function. And then I send this to the response, And then I do the next function. And then I send that one to the response. And when I say send it to the response, I build my response object by sending the data to the response, almost like a packet of data to the response. And the response has the complete response after every middleware request. That's what happens. Now, this is kind of how it works. Okay, so order is important in middleware, whenever we use middleware. So application level middleware, we use app.use. Router, if I'm going to route stuff, I want to go from one route to another route, I'm going to use router.use. Okay. Built-in middleware. There's 3 pieces of built-in middleware we're going to see in Express, right? We're going to see Express static, Express JSON, and Express URL encoded. Those things are built into Express, and what that does is those are 3 functions that we use. Static says we want to use static files. We want to read static files. Express JSON, we want to encode things or decode things in JSON, and so on. And also there is error handling middleware right here as well, right? Error handling middleware, we use app use, and then we have an error with a request, response, and next. And these are the basic middleware functions that we're going to see, okay? Here's a lot of third-party middleware functions that are very popular, and we're going to see some of them. One of them is body parser. I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see some of them. There's some really great ones, okay? So body parser is used by around 25 million people a week, all right? And we download it and we use it. And what it does is it parses incoming requests, the body of the request. The request itself is an object, and it has a lot of different properties, right? So it parses that request and it cleans it up. That's what it does, okay? Compression. We use compression when we want to compress our, our files. And it's really great because it improves performance. That's what it does. Connect Flash is another piece of middleware that we use because if I want to update a web page, because web pages don't have any state, we can send a message to the web page without updating it, which is really, really cool. And there's other ones: cookie parser, cores, debug, express session. When we need a session object that's on the server side, we can make an express session. Helmet, which allows us to secure our Express apps. Mongoose, we're going to use to connect to MongoDB. We're going to do that one with Mongoose. Morgan, where we use that for logging. Passport for authentication. And serve favicon for have a favicon little icon at the top of our tab. That's what it does. Okay? And you can see that these are very common Express middleware functions that we use. Okay?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, do you recommend learning Erlang for like servers?
Do you recommend what? Say that again.
Learning Erlang and Elixir.
Learning online?
Erlang and Elixir, the frameworks used for like making servers.
Sorry, can you type? You're just coming in really weird.
All right.
Type it in the chat so I can hear what you're saying. So I'm also going to change my. I'm going to change my volume so I go here instead of the. I can hear it here instead of up the up lines. It's a little bit. I'm getting a little low. Might just be me. There we go. Okay.
So, sir, I have typed
yes,
in
earning
the
an
chat.
elixir.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you need to know it right now, especially for this course. But again, any additional information, any additional modules and methods you learn are always good. But I don't think it's necessary for this course whatsoever.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sorry for the. I'm just trying to understand what you said. Okay. So again, one thing we also have to talk about is the application request and response objects. So there's 3 objects: the application object, the request object, and the response object for Express. Okay, that's what we have. So let's talk about those for a second. And I'm going slow here because again, what I want to do is I want you guys to understand all the parts of Express, because you're going to use Express and you're going to say something like, I don't know why I'm doing it. Tom told me to use it and I have no idea why, right? I want you to understand why. And for those people who are who know it already, great. For those people who don't know it, then this way, it'll bring you closer to what you need to know. So the application object, we use app.set. App.set, this is used to set environment variables that are built into Express. All right? App.get allows us to get an environment variable. So environment variables have a key value pair. That's what they have. And these are built in, right? App engine, this is used to define a template engine. Now, Express supports many template engines, not only handlebars, but also EJS and Pug and a bunch of other kinds of template engines they actually create a server-side view if you want to, okay? And app locals, this is used to send application level variables to all rendered templates, which is really cool. All right, so those are the application object. As well as app use, this is used to create Express middleware. You want to make your own middleware, this is how you do it. And then app and other things, verb means other things it has, and this is used to define one or more middleware functions as well. All right? App route, right? So this is creates a route for us, or routes, potato. It's kind of pronounced different ways. So let's say app route, okay, with the path. So it actually allows us to do things like get and post requests. That's what it does. App param allows us to attach certain functionality to any requests made on a routing parameter, which is pretty cool. And then we have the request object. The request object has several other things too. The request query, which allows us the object containing the parsed query string parameters to come through, right? The request parameters, params. This is an object containing the parse routing parameters. So things like, I want to go to this place. I want to navigate to this particular URL. Request body is what we normally use for forms. If I put a bunch of form data inside the request and I send it to the server, then it goes inside the request body. This what it goes. Okay, and this is where we use body parser. Okay, and so on. Okay. And we also have the response object. Response status code allows us to respond with an HTTP status code. Status codes are like 400, 404, 500, 304, and a bunch of the ones we've seen before. 401 means unauthorized. 404 means file not found, right? 200 means everything is okay. Okay, and you can look at the response codes. If you look them up online, there's lots of them. Okay. Response set, it's used to set the response HTTP header. HTTP headers are used when we want to change the contents of a page. Response cookie, response redirect. When you use this, redirects to another URL. So I want to change the path programmatically to go from index to about. I can do that with response redirect. That's what it does, right? Response send, this is used for non-streaming responses, and it does a lot of background work like setting the content type and everything else. Response JSON responds with a JSON object. This is what we're going to use a lot. When we make our API, we're going to use response JSON. Okay? And response render is if we're using a view engine. If we're not going to be doing this one, but if we're using a view engine, we can convert this to a view that we can see. Okay. When we want to serve static files, we can do something that looks like this. App.use, remember use is using middleware. I can use the built-in middleware function express static, and then I can use something called path join, and path is a built-in Node.js module. I can join the directory name with the client, and when I do that, what it does is it says, hey, you know what? Whenever I search for an object I can look inside the client folder first, so I can put things like CSS, images, JavaScript, like client-side JavaScript inside there, right? And I can also look inside node modules. Okay, this is a lot to take in without doing some code, and I think what we want to try and do here is use some of this to understand what we're talking about. Let's take a look now. We're going to shift gears a little bit again. We're almost at the end of our PowerPoint, but I want to actually do some work. And what I want to do now, this is our little project just for testing. We didn't do anything. I don't expect anything from this. This is just testing out, so see if you can do what we're doing. What I want to do is I want to drag and drop in here our project from last week and I want to convert it into something we're going to use for this week. Okay, so how do we do that? So last week, what we had was online. I'm just going to go online here. If I go to GitHub, here's GitHub from last week. I did this with a Mac. This week I'm doing it all with PC. And you can see there's no difference, right? But here's Georgian College. And last week we had a project here, MDEV1004, M2024 means summer 2024, ICEs. We only have one ICE from last week. It's this one, ICE 1, okay? And what I want to do, I don't have this on my computer right now. It's on my Mac at home. Remember, I was teleporting into my Mac at home, and I was using it. I was using the Mac, and I wasn't using this computer. Now I'm going to use this computer. How do I do it? I need to pull my files from GitHub. And the way I'm going to do that is, if I go to code here, I can just copy them, copy this path. Here's the path. And then what I can do is in command line, here's command line, right? You don't have to do this. This is just for me, right? I want to pull the files down into your folder. So I'm going to swim to the folder that I want, which is inside of my, I'm going to make a folder here for you, like I did on the Mac. So I'm going to make a brand new folder, new folder. I'm going to call this folder MDEV1004, right? And inside of MDEV1004, I want to put all my ICEs, right, like I had before. So I'm going to just kind of do one of these. I'm going to do a CD space, and I'm going to, oh man, I copied it in the wrong place. Hold on a second. I'm going to drag and drop this in here. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to kind of go into that folder. And then I'm going to issue this command, git clone, and I'm going to right click, and I should be able to get the file, the path for this. So here's my path from the clipboard, and I'm just going to right click and get that path. So this git clone command, git clone, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to download my or pull my files from my server from GitHub. That's what I'm going to do, pull my files. And when I pull the files from GitHub, I also want to be able to push. This is going to clone my folder, so I'm going to have my GitHub accessible here on my computer, not just on my Mac. Okay, so let's try this out. Again, if you've got this on your Mac, you don't have to do this. This is just for me. So I'm going to pull this, and you can see it's cloning, and it created my project ICE1 inside of MDEV1004. Let's see what it did for me though. Let's see if it did the right job. So MDEV1004, I have this ICEs, and inside there I have ICE1 and Git. Okay, so what I kind of did the right job. Here's what it is. Here's MDEV1004 ICEs. For this is the folder that I want to work with it, right? Because this folder here that was created came from my GitHub repository here. This is my GitHub repository. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to grab this folder here, and I want to copy from inside there ICE1. I want to copy and make it ICE2. Here's ICE2. Now this is something you need to do for ICE2, guys. Please make a copy of ICE1 and just call it ICE2. There's ICE2. Okay? And what I want to do with ICE2 is I want to pull ICE2 into Visual Studio Code. Right, so here is this. So ICE2, this is what you have to do. Pull it into Visual Studio Code. Hey, this is what we had last week, except now it's called ICE2, right? And what I also want to do here is I want to put this up right now as it is up on GitHub. So the way to do that, I'm going to my terminal here, and I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say added project files for ICE2. Right? And then I'm going to git push. These are all the commands. Git add, git commit, git push, just like we did last week. And when I go up online, now, let's go back up here, and if I refresh, you're going to see my repository is ICE2. So up online, I need two folders now in your repository, ICE1 and ICE2. And every week, we're going to add another folder, right? That's your homework that we're talking about. So this is the first part of your ICE2. First, copy ICE1 and make it into ICE2. Next, let's take a look at what we did last week so we can review what we kind of came up with. Last week we had this structure, right? Bin, public, routes, blah, 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 blah. This is ugly. We want to make this nicer. Here's the first thing I want you guys to do for this one. Go into your bin folder. And I want you to take your www folder and I want you to drag it out, or www, and drag it out over here. That's number one, first step. www is out here. Okay? Rename this thing. Rename this thing to server.js. So server.js. Rename it. Okay? Get rid of, delete your bin, please. Delete your bin. Delete this. So we're going to, again, just right click and delete. Right? You can also just press the delete key, whatever makes sense for you. No more bin. Awesome. We have our server.js here, and we have our public, we have our routes, we have our app, and we have to change some stuff here, guys. Take a look here. Right? Our server.js is the one we want. We pulled it out of www, right? And here at the beginning, we have require statements, and it's looking inside of our /app. This is wrong because server.js was www. It was inside of a bin folder, and now it's not inside of a bin folder anymore. We just need to look at /app like this. So this is the first change. Make sure you change this to /app in the server.js. /app. Save. Also, the debug requires ICE1 server. This is just a debugging statement. We'll call this ICE2. Save. We'll also change the package.json. Package.json says ICE1. Let's change this to ICE2. We'll also make this version 0.0, instead of 0.00, we'll make it 0.02 because we're going to start doing that kind of stuff. Our start method in the package.json is not going to be in /bin www. It's in fact going to be server.js. Okay, that's where it's going to be, server.js. And so far, that's all the changes I want you to make. Okay, this is part of in-class exercise 2 for this Sunday at midnight. So please pay attention, follow along, make sure you do what I do. Okay? Let's run this thing and check it out. Yes? Sorry? Yeah, I changed it to 0.2. That's what I did. Same thing. Yeah, that's what I did. I just changed. I have the same files from ICE1. I copied it to ICE2, and I'm good, right? And I'm just modifying it right now. I'm telling you how to modify stuff. Okay? All right, next. So we have a couple of things here, but we're going to get back to this. Let's run this thing and see if it works the way it works right now. So I'm going to kind of go here. I'm going to clear the screen, and I'm going to run nodemon, right? And nodemon, if everything works, it's going to work. But in this case, it did not. So what happened? It says, cannot find module HTTP errors. Why not? What's wrong with my problem? What's my problem here? What's my problem, guys, online? Why do I have this problem? What did I do wrong? What did I forget to do? I didn't do a yarn install, right? I didn't do a yarn install, right? Because I copied this whole thing from the GitHub. GitHub doesn't include node modules, so I have to do a yarn install. Let's try this. So yarn install. And now it's going to install all my packages, and node modules now exists. Before it didn't exist. Let's try again. Let's try again. We'll run nodemon one more time, and now we're good to go. Okay? We're good to go with nodemon. Let's try it out. Let's go back here, and if I refresh, if I just take this away and go :3000, we're going to see Georgian. Welcome to Georgian, like we had last week. The exact same thing that we had last week, except last week we were using www. This time we're in the bin, and this time we're using server.js. That's the difference so far. Okay? Let's inspect this stuff a little bit more, but I'm going to stop nodemon for a second. We have to make more changes. Let's make some more changes. First of all, we have a public folder here's a public folder, and we have a routes folder and a views folder. That's what we have so far, right? The public folder has something called style sheets. It's a folder called style sheets. I want to rename this folder, right? I want to rename, right click, rename. That's what I want to do. Right click, rename. I want to rename style sheets. I want to rename it to content with a capital C. There it is, content. I also want to add in my public folder, I want to add a new folder called scripts with a capital S. Scripts, okay? So now I have two folders. I have content and I have scripts inside my public folder. All right? So content and scripts. In scripts, I want you to add a new file. We're going to call this app.js for now. App.js. And this is where my client-side JavaScript is going to go, okay, for now. So this is content and scripts. Also, we want to add another folder called assets. Assets. Here's my assets folder, right? And in my assets folder, right, I want to be able to put things like images and other things, okay? That's where my images are going to go, inside of assets. So I'm restructuring my Express generator stuff. Okay, that's what I'm doing here. Notice I'm using capitals for my files, my folder structure. And question, I want to put my hand up. I had some stuff before, but they're gone. I had a scripts folder actually in the original one. If you actually look in the in-class exercise 1, I had back last video, there was other folders here. They're gone. Why are they gone? Because they were empty. GitHub does not allow you to put any empty folders. If I want empty folders to go up, we can add in a placeholder called .getKeep. Let me show you this. If I want the assets folder that's empty to go up on GitHub, I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call it .getKeep. .getKeep allows me to create the folder, and it's just an empty garbage file that we put up there. All right? And we can do that for scripts as well if we didn't have anything in here. Okay, so any empty folders, we can add a .getKeep if we want to keep the structure, which is what we want. Okay. All right, let's keep going. I want to rename public to client with a capital C. Let's do that. So I want to rename public. So refactor rename or rename down here. You can also press F2 to rename. And I'm going to rename this to client with a capital C. Okay, client. So now my structure is client, assets, content, scripts, like this. I'm going to stop there for a second. Are you with me? Thumbs up if you're with me. And I want to make sure you guys are good, because we're going to do this is part of your in-class exercise 2. Awesome. Thank you, Yash Kumar. How about you guys? Are you guys with me? What's wrong? Why are you not with me? You did all that now? Good. You're slow. Oh, that's okay. Slow is okay. All right, so now that's the first thing. Now, I want to make, here's something I want to do. I want to make a new folder called server, right? The server folder, right? So let's make a new folder down here. I'm going to click on this part down here, and then click here. I'm going to make a new folder called server. All right? In my server folder, I want to put in the following stuff. I want to drag and drop in my routes in my server folder, like this, routes. And I also want to drag and drop in my views inside the server folder. Okay? So server has routes and views. Are you with me? Routes and views. I'm dragging and dropping routes and views. Now, question for you guys. For Windows, not for Mac, but for Windows, is there a problem renaming this from routes with a lowercase r to routes with a capital R? Is there a problem? Do you see a problem? Anybody online? Is there a problem with Windows? Mac, there's no problem. You can rename it to capital R. I want to make capitals, not lowercase r. But Windows has a problem. What's the problem that Windows has? Anybody? Windows, okay, No one's really answering. Windows has a problem with naming. For Windows, uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter. That means server routes lowercase or routes uppercase in Windows is the same. We need to change this. So the way we rename twice. Here's how we do it. We rename this once, we change it to like routes G, like this, some weird name, right? And then we rename it again. And we just call it routes with a capital S, with a capital R, and then we're good. That's a trick, right? Because we can't name it from lowercase r to capital R because it's the same thing in Windows. It just won't work. Let's try the same trick for views. So views, we're just going to rename it some other thing. I'm just going to add a letter like G at the end. And then rename again to views with a capital V. There we go. Okay, for Mac, you shouldn't have a problem renaming. Next thing, I want to add in config to the server. I'm going to right click. I want to make a new folder. We're going to call this config. Here's my config folder. And I want to drag and drop my app.js into my config folder like so. My app.js is in my config folder. And so now my structure looks like this. Client has assets, content, scripts. Server has config, routes, and views. All right, that's how it looks. It looks inside there. Okay, that's how it is right now. Are you with me? I know I'm going slow. This is slow, actually. You're laughing. Why are you not with me? You don't know how to do this stuff? You can't rename stuff in Visual Studio Code? You should be able to rename it. Yeah.
Professor, for the we created the server folder, and when I try to
go ahead.
When I try to add the folders that we had outside, like views and routes, but the first folder that I add is routes. It creates a slash. It says server/routes.
Yeah.
And when I add views, it goes inside,
that's
it
right,
drops
like
down.
this. Yeah, because that's what Visual Studio Code does. It should look like this right now. Okay, so it should look like this. Right? And by the way, you can also do this if you don't like doing this here in Visual Studio Code. Remember that on the operating system, it does the exact same thing. So if you actually look in your operating system here, ICE2, you can see that it has the same structure. So client has assets, content, and scripts, right? And server has config, routes, and views. That's what you should have right now.
Okay, so if I'm getting a problem on Visual
you can do
Studio,
it here.
I can just directly,
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay, good. So let's go back to this now. So config, routes, and views, and we're going to make more changes to this, okay? But this is the first step. Now we need to make it work. We messed it up because we moved app inside another folder, server's looking for something, we moved it to something else. Let's fix that. So server.js is looking for, oh wait, what the heck? How did it do this? Visual Studio Code is how it did it, right? Visual Studio Code figured out my path changes automatically for me, right? This is the proper path now for my app, right? Server./config app, which means I'm looking inside the server folder, inside the config, and inside of the app.js, and this is good. How about app? Did it figure things out? Probably not, all right? Let's take a look at the config file for app.js now. App.js is not looking in the right space at all. All right, let's take a look here. It says .. So up here, .. is up, then down. This is good, actually. These are good. These two things are good. But these are not good. These are not good, right? Let's fix these. So views is dir name capital V views. This can't change. This is not a path, right? And public, there's no more public. It's called client. And by the way, client isn't here anymore, right? It is up a couple of levels. So it's not here. It's up one level, up another level, and to client, right? So it's like .. client. That's where it is, right? It's a different level. And same thing with views. Views is not here. It's .. right? Because it goes up one, to views. That's the proper routing now for inside of app.js. App.js is this, right? So all I'm doing here, just for those people who are wondering, what is he doing, right? I'm just making sure that with the changes that I made, I changed the folder structure, that the app can still work. That's what I want to do. I'm just making sure that the pathing is correct. That's all I'm doing here, okay? Okay, this is very good. I'm going to save. This is nice. And now what I want to do with this one is I want to run this thing to make sure it runs okay. Okay, to make sure everything is okay. Let's try it out. Let's see if everything runs okay. One thing also, sorry, one more thing. In views, in my views, it says I'm looking for style sheets, style.css. This is wrong. It's actually going to be in content style.css. So we're going to say that this is content, right? And content is where it's going to be, but content is part of public, right? Or it's part of client. That's where that is. Because in app.js, what we said was we're going to look inside client. Client is going to be part of the path. That's what we said. Okay? And so index.ejs, which is our view, right, is going to look inside of content style.css. In fact, I don't like style.css. Let's rename this to app.css. App.css. And so then in my index, it's got to be content app.css. All right, that's the first thing. Save. Okay? And I think now we're ready to redo it. Let's see if it runs now again. Okay? Let's see if we do that. So again, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to clear. I'm going to do a node mon, and hey, it looks okay. Let's see if it actually runs in the server, because I'm going to go here and refresh. Does it crash? No, we're good. And this is our first restructure, our first level restructure we're going to use. Now we're going to add TypeScript. This is the next piece, okay? And we'll talk about that in a second. Back to this now. Let's get out of NodeMon again, because we're going to make more changes. First, I want to put this up on GitHub, because I made a lot of changes. This is your first GitHub push with the change structure. So I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m, and we're going to say restructured folders for ICE2. Okay? And then git push. Git push. So now, when we look up on GitHub, after this is done, there it is. It found some vulnerabilities. I'm not worried about the vulnerabilities. We're going to fix those later. For now, what I want to do is I want to go back to GitHub. Let's take a look at GitHub and refresh. And you're going to see that I have 3 commits. Here's my 3rd commit. My friends, one thing I get a lot from students is they only commit one time for their assignments, right? In class exercise 2, I've just already done 2 commits, right? I've added one for in class exercise 2 and the second one when I restructured. Every time you change something, and as you continue to work with GitHub or any kind of thing in your project, keep doing commits. If I add a feature, do a commit. If I go to the washroom, do a commit. If I stop for the day, do a commit, right? So that you make sure that you can revert back if there's a problem, okay? So this is in class exercise 2. You can see that this is, let's see what this looks like. You can see that the folder structure is exactly the way I wanted it. Client, server. Let's take a look at that client. Remember, we had nothing in assets, but because we have a .gitkeep file, it's okay, right? It's okay. And now we have our folder structure kind of the way we wanted, okay? So far. Next, let's just review what's happening inside of VS Code one more time, right? So what's really happening in this app? Well, let's take a look at server.js. So server.js, what it does is it's kind of looking here at, it's going to create an app which is requiring the app itself, right, from our config app inside the server. That's where it is. So really the way you read this is the app configuration for the server. Look, app configuration for the server. See how that works? And here I can see that this is the index route for the server, right? This is the index view for the server. That's how this works, okay? This folder structure, you can read it from the inside out. Okay, that's how we look at it, okay? Okay. And this is the scripts on the client side. This is the assets on the client side. This is the content from the client side. Okay, this is how this works. So you can see here that we have all this stuff, server, config, routes, and views. And inside of our server.js, the first thing we do is get a reference to my app inside of my app itself. I do some debugging. I request HTTP. And here I finally create my server way down here. This is where I create my server. Like so. Let me show you this. So here's I normalize the port. I do all this work. And down in here, I start listening. Okay. So here's server.listen. So here I'm creating my server on line 22 inside of server.js. I make a brand new server object, and I'm listening on the port that I mentioned, which is port 3000. If you want to listen on another port, you can change the value here. Okay? You can change the value here. So what I want to do now, and this is for the last part of the day, I want to convert all this to TypeScript. But first, whenever we do TypeScript, my friends, what do we need? A tsconfig.json file. That's what we need, right? A tsconfig.json file. So let's add that in. So first, when I'm converting to TypeScript, I'm right-clicking and I'm adding a new file. I'm going to call this tsconfig.json. Okay? tsconfig.json. My tsconfig.json file has to have a JSON format, so it has to have curly braces on the outside. And you can see it's recommending stuff. This is Copilot recommending some changes to me. I'm using GitHub Copilot here, and you can see that it's saying, hey, this is all really good. I like some of this. I want to use compiler options. Here's compiler options. And I don't want to use all of this yet. I want to have a target. So let's use the target. So the target is how I'm transpiling. My transpiling is I want to use is, see how it has different ES versions, ES 2015, ES 2023, and so on. I want to use the latest version, which is ES 2023. Now, here's something. Why not ES 2024? Because we're in 2024 right now. Why not ES 2024? For the people that are online. Anyone know? Remember, ES stands for ECMAScript, the thing that JavaScript is based on. Why not ES 2024? Because ES 2024, my friends, isn't made yet. It's made in July, usually of the year, of the same year. So this July, ES 2024 is going to be out, most likely. Okay? So that's the first thing. So ES 2023 is okay. Next, module, CommonJS is good. Next, out directory I don't need. What I want is source maps. Source maps is true. That's what I want. And I also want I want to be able to use, this is not just server client side. I want to use server side stuff. That's what I want. And I'm just going to, want to grab one of these. I want to use server side, TypeScript. And for server side TypeScript, you need additional things here, all right, that are going to work for us. And so the thing that we need is some experimental modules, right, for some experimental modules for the stuff that we're using, okay? And also additional configurations for my tsconfig.json file, all right? So let's continue. So we've done this so far. Source maps is true. Let's also make it so that we're going to make it strict. So we're going to say strict is true. Okay, so that's the first thing. When we say strict is true, when we convert from TypeScript to JavaScript, we're going to say always, like, use strict, which is what it's going to do. Okay? I also want to change the ES module interop. That's a thing where I'm going to make that is true. So I'm going to use ECMAScript modules that I want to use here as well. I want to also force consistent casing in file names. All right, I want to use that as true. And I also want to include always strict, because that'll prevent me from doing things like sometimes when we create variables, we're not always strict. Strict and always strict is they work together. One day they're going to combine those two things. They do different things. We're also going to do emit decorator metadata. All right, we're going to make that true. We're going to also include experimental decorators. That's true. And we're also going to say module resolution. We're going to use that as node. Okay, so because we're using node on the back end. Okay. We're also going to use no implicit any. We're not going to allow any implicit any, right? And we're also going to have no implicit returns. No implicit returns. So that way, this way we're going to explicitly say how this is going to work. No explicit this, that's for sure, we're going to use that. As well as strict null checks. We're going to use that as true. And then I'm also going to include strict bind call apply to true, as well as strict function types. I like that one. And strict property initialization. And we're also going to remove comments, like we said before. I also want to, another property I want is I want to exclude, we can exclude certain things too. I want to exclude node modules. I don't want to include node modules when I transpile, ever. Because that makes it that like someone else's code is going to be transpiled. Because node modules, this folder here, comes from external. It comes from other people's third party. And so it allows me to do that. So save. And this is okay. Now it says ECMAScript 2023. It says set the JavaScript language version. It says it must be, it doesn't like 2023. It likes 2022 and older. That's what it wants me to put in. And even when I do that, it complains. So ES like lowercase. It wants me to do like lowercase ES 2022 or something like that. And even so it complains. Don't worry about this, right? Because it says take a look at the TypeScript version that including incompatible languages and so on. You can also do something, if I do something like ES 2015, it's still going to complain. Take a look. No matter what I put in here, it's going to complain for my target, right? So for now, we're just going to leave it to ES 2023. Don't worry about what this is. It's because we haven't saved, we haven't transpiled yet. Okay, so even though it's underlined, don't worry about it. All right, so this here, if you guys can take a snapshot of this, this is my TypeScript tsconfig.json file. You can take this from online too. I'm also going to push this to GitHub in a second, and you can always read my GitHub and compare mine to yours. All right. Now this is the first step. This is the first step, right? And I'm just going to close this off right now. It's red. It says it's red, but don't worry about it. We're going to come back to this in a second, right? The next part about this is we need to do a couple of things here to make this work. One, we don't have any TypeScript files to convert. Let's start converting. And I'm going to start converting from server.js. The way you convert to TypeScript is you rename this to TypeScript. So let's rename this. So I'm going to kind of do F2, and I'm going to rename this to server.ts. There's my server.ts, right? The problem when we do server.ts is it doesn't understand requires. It wants to use imports. And in our package.json, it doesn't understand how to do cookie parser, debug, EJS, express. We need to give it some help, right? And by the way, these are old modules. Let's add these in again. Let me see if I can upgrade a little bit. So I'm going to go here, clear. And I'm going to start upgrading these modules one by one so you can see how this works. So first I want to upgrade cookie parser. This is how we do that. We're going to say yarn add cookie parser. Take a look at what the value is. It says 1.44, right? And if I add in cookie parser again, does it change that value, right? It goes to 1.46, so that upgraded. Let's try it again. And I'm just going to close this off so you can see it better. What about debug? Can I upgrade that one? So I'm going to say yarn add debug. And that's going to go from 2.69 to 4.34, my friends. Huge difference, huge improvement. Let's continue to upgrade. I'm going to do yarn add EJS, right? And then you can see it goes from 2.61 to 3.110, right? Which is crazy. And how about Express? Express is using 4. We want to use 5 or something, the newest version. So we're going to say yarn add, right, Express. And when we add Express, it goes from 4.16.1 to 4.19.2. Pretty good, right? And we're going to say yarn add HTTP errors, right? And HTTP errors is going to go from 1.63 to 2.00. And last but not least, we're going to say yarn add Morgan. And it's going to say, it's going to go from whatever it was to 1.10.0. So this is the latest version of these dependencies. Now there's two things in a package, okay? One thing that you see here is package dependencies, and another thing is dev dependencies. So project dependencies and dev dependencies. We need dev dependencies. Because we're using TypeScript, we need support for TypeScript. And we need these type definitions that exist for all these packages. Here's how you add them. All right. First, we're going to add node. This is how you do this. You're going to go here and you're going to say yarn add at types. We're going to say we need types. We need a definition for what node is, for TypeScript to understand node, right? And we're going to say node. And then instead of just putting it like this, we're going to say dash dash dev. Dash dash dev tells it to put it inside a different place inside of package.json. Let me show you. If you press enter, I add it in, and then now, after it's done, it adds a new section called dev dependencies. And now we have node at 20.12.12. It's not the latest version. It covers the long-term support version of node, but it's good enough for us. Okay? Let's continue. We're going to do the same thing, but we can do it all at once. Here's how you can do it all at once. Ready? Yarn add at types / cookie parser at types / debug at types / EJS at types / express at types / HTTP errors at types / Morgan, and then at the end dash dash dev. See this line? I can do all of this at once. So instead of me having to do one at a time, I can do all of them. And then what it'll do is it'll go up, grab everything, and install all of those dependencies now inside my package.json. So now my package.json looks like this. My friends, snapshot. All right, this is what it looks like. This is what I want your package.json to look like. Okay? Again, you can also look at my GitHub repository. It'll be up there in a second. So why did I do this? I wanted the latest version of all my modules. Express Generator is old. I told you that. It's got some problems, right? And instead of me using the Express Generator, I want to use the latest version of my code here. All right? That's what I wanted to do. And so I upgraded to the latest version of all these modules, right? Now, this can cause some issues, compatibility issues, but we're going to fix this in a second. Next, now that we've updated my package.json and changed everything, my naming convention, where we've also changed to server.ts, but we're not finished doing everything, take a look how server.ts now is not complaining anymore. It's okay with requires. Look, requires are okay right now, right? Before they weren't. I got some problems though, my friends. I got real problems. I got a real serious problem. We got vars here, and I hate vars. We're going to convert these to an import statement. This is how you do that. You're going to wipe out this, and we're going to say import app from this, right? And the problem that it has when it comes to importing, it says that if I hover over, it says could not find a declaration file for module server config app. Let's leave that error there for a second. We're going to come back and fix this one. How about this one? Okay, we're going to do the same thing. And we're going to break this down into two lines, right? We're going to say that we're going to say that import, here's how we do it, import debug from debug, right? That worked, right? Semicolon. And now what we want to do is we want to say that debug, we want to pass in this. This just helps us debug. That's what it does. It says ICE2 server is what we're debugging. Okay. Same thing with this. This is a built-in module in Node. Let's rename this the same way. So we're going to say, instead of this, we're going to say import HTTP from HTTP. That's the new standard. We use imports, not requires. Okay. And we're going to fix this one. Bear with me. We're going to keep going. Okay, this one is new. This is something else. We're going to say let port, because we're never going to use vars. Let port equal to normalize. Normalize is a function where we use the process.environment port or port 3000. That's what this says. Process.environment port means that if I go to render.com or some other server online, I'm not going to get port 3000. It's going to give me something else, whatever port it wants to give me. Okay? And then I'm going to app set my port to whatever that port is. My var server, we don't want that. We want to change this to const server, because our server is never going to change. Const server is equal to HTTP create server, right? This is all good. Here's our function, normalize port, right? And now this is where we get a little funky. So what value is normalized port? Remember, we can't allow explicit any. What type of value could this be? Well, if we look here, the port is going to be a string. That's what it's going to be, a string, right? Well, if it's a string, right, it's going to return a couple of things. Normalized port returns any right now. But let's go back to this. Let's say that val is a string, right? We can say that. That's good. And you can see here that this works for this piece right here, right? And now what does val return? Val returns, look what it says here. Val returns a string or a number or false. That's what it returns, right? And that's okay with TypeScript. TypeScript can allow you to return multiple types, string or number or false. That's what it returns right here. Okay? Let's continue. Error. On error. It returns this error, but it doesn't know what type it is. Well, we can know that it is of type error, right? HTTP error is what it is, right? Error. HTTP error. And we know that I need to import HTTP error from HTTP errors. It actually did it for me. It did this thing for me, okay? As I typed it. As I type this, right? It understands that this is an error. Okay, cool. So we're good. It throws an error. Now, this is no good. Var bind type of port. So we're going to say, well, this is a string. We know that. And we're going to make this into a let. No more vars, remember? And we're still good. We're still good. We're still good. On listening, this is good so far. Let's also change our curly brace structure, because I don't like the curly braces that we're making right now. They're pretty ugly, right? And this is a problem. It says that on listening returns void. You can actually tell it explicitly to return void by doing this. That's an explicit return. It returns void, right? Function on error, it returns void too, right? You can say that like this, colon, void. It returns void, right? Normalized port returns string, number, or false. We can do that too. We can be explicit here. We can say returns string or number or Boolean. Okay, that's what it returns. And again, I like my curly braces on top of each other, so I'm going to do that. Curly braces on top of each other. That's my coding style. There we go. Okay. And these ones too. I don't like curly braces like this. I like my curly braces on top of each other because it's easier for me to work with my code. There we go. So this is a problem right here. Address is interesting because address is possibly null, it says. Address is possibly null because address, which is this one, address is either address info, string, or address info or null, and we can say that, right? We can say that address, right? We want to cast this as whatever we want. We can do that. We can say that it returns, we can kind of put this in brackets. Here's how we can do it. We can put this in brackets and we can say as string or number, right? Or address info, right? Because that's what it was. It can be as string or address info, this one, right? And when we do that, what we're doing is we're casting the return, whatever this thing returns, we're recasting and we're removing null. We're saying it can't be null, right? So address is either string or address info, which takes away this problem, which was possibly null. What it also did was at the top, right? We also included address info from net. All right, so this is what it did for us. So this is our first file, and server.ts now is done. But we have to fix app.ts because app.ts has a problem because it's not a module right now. Let's fix that next. But first, let's put this up on GitHub. So again, git add dot, git commit -m, we'll say converted server.js to TypeScript, right? Git push. And we're going to run a little bit overtime today, guys, and that's okay because no one is coming into our class. That's why I chose this class too. So we're going to run right till 2 o'clock, I think, right for this one. If you guys have to go online, it's okay. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep recording until that time. All right, great. So this is what this does. This is awesome. And then we haven't transpiled yet, so this is still having a problem. I'm okay with this. I'm going to close this. I'm going to close this. We're going to keep closing stuff until we have what we want, okay? App.ts we're going to convert later. Git keep we can close. And we're going to close this and this. Let's go to the next part, which is inside of my server, inside of my config. I want to convert this app.js to app.ts. Let's do that. So we're converting to app.ts. There we go, app.ts, done, right? And now we have a problem, right? Because all of this needs to be converted. So we're going to say import, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to say import, create error, and then from HTTP errors. Okay, we're going to say do the same thing for the other ones. You guys do this now, and I'm going to just import. I'm going to replace my vars here with imports. Import, import, import. And here too. Import and import. Okay, and instead of require, I'm going to do from like this. So I'm just going to kind of grab this thing. There we go. Just nice and quick as I'm converting from one to the other. And we're going to fix this in a second. Bear with me. Right, and get rid of these little brackets here and here and here. This one I have to also do, so I'm going to do from. And this one too. We need to get rid of this bracket and this bracket. And the reason why this is complaining, by the way, is because routes, it says, could not find a declaration module for routes either. That's why it's complaining. We're going to fix this. And then we're going to make it const. This one, this app is going to be const app express because now we're going to make an app that's express. We're going to instantiate an object. This is create an express app. That's what this does. This part right here. So first we import our modules, then we create an express app. We've done the views and client and all this stuff. We tested all this stuff. Oh man, now down here, this is the problem, right? And it says function, error, request, response, and next. What are these things? Well, we know that error is of type HTTP error. We know that request is an express request. This is a request object. That's what this is. But it's a special one. It's an express dot request. So express request. If I just type request, by the way, like just this, then this is the one I want. Notice down here it says request. That one, capital R. This is a response. But remember, we have to tell it what type it is. We just can't do whatever we want to do. This one. So where it says express here, response, and next is the next function. So this next function is express, and that satisfies the requirement of this, right? However, right? Notice that that function no longer has an error anymore. And the last thing we need to do is change this module exports, right, to exports default. So export default, right, is app. Export default app, like this. And what export default app is going to export my application, my file, this file here, so that it can be used other places. Now if I go back to my my server.js, look at it's good now. It doesn't have the problem anymore because we fixed app, right? App.ts has a problem because we're using my index router and my user router. I don't care about a user router right now, so I'm going to get rid of it. No more user router. And down here, we don't need the user route. We don't need this user route anymore. We're going to get rid of that too. Okay? Again, we're just configuring. That's all we're doing. We're getting rid of the user router and the user route. That's all we did. Okay? But inside of my routes folder, we have a users file. We can get rid of this, delete the user file. We don't need that for now. And the index needs to change to index.ts. Let's change that. So this changes to index.ts. There we go. And now again, same thing is going to happen here. We're going to move this from var express to import express from express. So from express. We don't use var. We're going to use const for the router. And everything is good except for this part, which is going to be export default router. And that, my friends, fixes the router problem. Okay? And if I look at app.ts, it's not complaining anymore, right? It's all good. App.ts is good, right? My index router is good. You can see that that's okay, right? My views have nothing to change because they're okay, right? And my friends, now we're ready to transpile for the first time. Transpiling, how do you do that? Remember, there's two ways I said in the PowerPoint slide deck. One is just use TSC. So let's try this first time. For the first time, we can just use TSC, right? And what TSC does is going to go through the entire project and try and convert it to TypeScript. That's what it's going to do. And if there's any errors, it's going to spit out errors, right? And it did. It has an error. It has 2023, right? So it says found one error, 2023, okay? But for the rest of it, it converted. Take a look here. In my index routes, it converted it to JavaScript. Here's JavaScript right here. This is the pure JavaScript version, right? And for my config, it went to app.js. Look, there's the app.js conversion, right? So it converted. Okay, good, nice. So let's continue, right? Let's continue. So let's do this, clear. And sometimes what happens is with ECMAScript, like, you know, the reason why it's complaining with tsconfig.json being 2023, ES 2023, is it doesn't like the latest version for whatever reason. So the safer thing to do is put it back to something like 2015, right? That's the safer one to do. It's still okay. And if I tried it again, if I did a TSC, but this time let's do a TSC space minus W. TSP minus W. If I did that, what it's going to do is it's going to be in watch mode. That means anything I change now is going to be automatically transpiled, right? That's what it's going to do. Automatic transpile. Okay? And now let's use NodeMon. Let's make another terminal. Let's make another terminal. And in this terminal, so I added 2 terminals now. I have one that's here, right? And one that's here, 2 terminals. This one will do NodeMon. Okay, NodeMon is going to run. Okay, and now there's no errors here. We should, don't quote me, we should be 100% working. And this is your in-class exercise 2. Let's try this out. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to refresh, and we're golden. We know it's working because if it didn't work, this would cause an error, a problem right here. Some stuff to add. We could add more stuff in here. For example, in my, let's try something. In my client, last thing we're going to do to prove this out. In my client, we have app.ts. Let's convert this one to JavaScript as well, right, or TypeScript. So again, F2, app.ts, right, app.ts. And as soon as I do this, it converts it and makes an empty JavaScript file. Look, it's empty. Just says use strict at the top, right? Let's make something. Let's test it out. Let's test out JavaScript. Here's JavaScript, and here's a closure for the first time. This is called an IFI, which is an immediately invoked function expression, right? What an IFI is, look, it's doing it for me, right? It looks like this, function, right? And we have a couple of curly braces here, and then this. This is an IFI, my friends. And when you look at an IFI for the first time, you're looking at it going like, what the heck is this thing? It's a closure. It allows us to trap our variables inside of this thing so they don't escape into the global namespace, right? Let's make a function called start. So function start returns void. And what I want with this one is the start function is do a console log that says app started. I like this. Here's what I want to do with this function. Okay, this is also part of your in-class exercise 2. Okay, I want to do a when I do a window, the window itself, right? I want to do a window dot add event listener, and on load, I want to access the start function. Okay, that's what this does. So what this does is it waits for the window to load and then calls start. So this function will only be called when the window is finished loading, which means when the browser finishes loading, it's going to call this function start. Okay? Again, pure JavaScript, but I've converted it to TypeScript just for you. All right? Now let's take a look at the JavaScript version. It's almost identical. Look, it says JavaScript, and this is TypeScript, almost identical. How do I make this app.ts in the console look like app started? How do I do this part? Well, inside of the index.ejs file, I can include it here as I normally would. Here's how it works. I can say something like script source, I like this, scripts app.js, like so. And what this does is it loads my script right here at the bottom. Okay, again, this is JavaScript 101. If you've done JavaScript before, and if you've done a little bit of HTML, this should not be mind-blowing, okay? But let's take a look at what it does here in my code. So if I refresh, you can't see anything here, but if I do Control-Shift-J, right, then you can see here that app started. That's my console, which means we have full functionality, my friends, because it's gone to the server, loaded the page, right, and gone to my client side and output my app started. That's what this does. So we know it's working. We know that my little file is working, and this is what I want you guys to do. Convert your, your JavaScript to TypeScript. I've given you the pattern, and you can see what it is. Now, last step, very last step, is instead of welcome to Georgian, let's do welcome to, and we'll say TypeScript. Like this, welcome to TypeScript. And when I do that, and if I go back, you're going to see that if I refresh, we're going to see TypeScript. Welcome to TypeScript. And that's all I want you guys to do for in-class exercise 2. Okay, I'm going to put this up on GitHub. and you should have everything you want. I'm also going to update the instructions on Blackboard to make sure that you have everything you need. All right, so let's put this up on GitHub. I'm opening up another terminal for that, and I'm just going to say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say converted project to TypeScript. And then git push. Now I could have done many other commits here because I modified one thing, I modified another thing, but I did it all at once. Okay? And we'll deal with these other errors next time. Questions before we move on for the day? Anyone have questions? So guys, this is your in-class exercise 2. I recommend you start your assignment 1 by, if you already have stuff on MongoDB Atlas, awesome. If you don't, put together a list of your 20 movies. They should be original, different than everyone else's, right? And make sure you put them up on MongoDB Atlas for yourself, all right? Questions before you guys go? Guys, thank you so much. If you need time with me, book time with me on bookings for Microsoft. And I have that again on your Blackboard. So if you look actually on Blackboard, remember you can always book time with me here on office hours. Office hours allows you to book time with me, okay, if you need any time. Otherwise, that's it, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. I'll stop recording now.